Yes, I know. We've been hanging out in Flanders a lot. And it's not that there is no art being made outside of Flanders. It's just that in the dialogue of art history, when looking at the Renaissance, we see a lot of influential art and artists coming out of Flanders. But I just want to take a moment to give you a sense of what is happening outside of Flanders. In contrast to the prosperity and the peace that is experienced in Flanders, this is a time when England and France are fighting in what is known as the Hundred Years' War. The Hundred Years' War, it got its name because, well, it lasted a little over 100 years. It's not that they named it the Hundred Years' War, like they didn't know it was going to take 100 years. But historians looking backwards said, let's call that the Hundred Years' War. It was a war for control over the throne of France between France and England. Now, I'm showing you these maps and I'll walk you through it in a bit, but you might be asking, what does this have to do with art history? It's going to come back whenever we look at the artwork. But the Hundred Years' War fought between England and France, and they were fighting for the throne of France. The next question that you might ask, why are the English trying to get the French throne? It's a long and complicated story of inheritance that we're not going to get into for an art history class. If you want to know more, take a Western civilization history class. But I'll just tell you that the English had a claim through various intermarriage to the throne, and then the French were like, no, our claim is stronger than that claim, okay? So the map here in 1337 shows you the territory owned by France and England. And you can see that England did have holdings on mainland Europe. Then, in 1360, with this rising conflict and control over the French throne, we see England take more territory of the French kingdom. What? I know. Look at what happens next. So we were over here in 1360. By 1429, England has lost territory in southern France, but has gained territory in northern France, including beloved Flanders. And the French are freaking out. They need Flanders. They need the prosperity. They need the economy of their Flemish duchy. And, well, they want all of their territory that they once had. It is around 1429 that we see two things happen. We see Charles the Seventh. That's his name there. 5, 6, 7. Charles the Seventh is the youngest, or is the son of the king, and he is fighting for his throne against the English. Come in the hero of the day, Joan of Arc. She was referred to as the Maid of Orleans because she drives out the forces of the French and she unites she drives out the forces of the English. She unites the French. She says, I have a vision from God that Charles needs to be the king of France. And they unite under the words and the visions of Joan of Arc, and they push back the forces of the English. I'm simplifying this to a disgusting amount. If you want to know more, Google search Joan of Arc. But she later becomes Saint Joan of Arc, and she is a patron saint of France because she basically helped to unite the French and protect the French throne from the English. What does this have to do with art, Miss Cortez? Chill, okay? Chill. The reason that I bring up the 100 Years' War is because during the time in which this battle has happened, the King of France and the Dukes of France, the Duchies of France, they are weakened. The rise and the power of a merchant class and the rise in power of duchies like Burgundy will basically mean that more people outside of the nobility have the funds and the desire to pay for art, right? So the king's busy. The nobles are freaking out. And this merchant class is gaining a lot more power and influence, and therefore want to establish themselves with art. Like this piece. Ooh, ah. This is called the Melon Diptych and is done by the French artist Jean Fouquet. Jean Fouquet painted this for this man here. His name is Etienne Chevalier. And it's called the Melon Diptych because for a time it was located in Melun Cathedral. But I want you to think of this as the private diptych for Etienne. Now, Etienne was a man of lower birth. He was the son of one of King Charles VII's secretaries, and so not part of a noble family. And he rose to become the royal treasurer. So he rose in power and status, and he had this commissioned by Jean Fouquet. Jean Fouquet, who was beloved in France. He was in high demand among the French aristocracy. He had a workshop in Tours, France, and he was just like, if you want to be impressive, if you want to get, the highest status of a French artist, it's Jean Fouquet. And Etienne Chevalier is like, yeah, I want Jean to paint this of me. Paint this of me and what? I wish I could see your faces right now, because when I show this painting in class, students are always a little uncomfortable by what they're looking at. What we are seeing is Etienne, there he is, with his patron saint, Saint Stephen, and they are looking into a vision of heaven where cherubim and seraphim, these red and blue angels here, they surround a throne in which the Virgin Mary is breastfeeding baby Jesus. What? We're going to get into the details of this panel here in a bit, but let's look at this one here. So there is Etienne, and Saint Stephen is his patron saint. Just a heads up, in French, Etienne is Stephen. Etienne is French for Stephen. And we know this to be Saint Stephen because he's holding, on top of the Bible, he's holding his element of martyrdom. He was killed by being stoned to death for his faith. He was Christian at a time when it was illegal to be Christian, and so he was punished by being stoned to death. So oftentimes these martyred saints, those who have been killed for their faith, they have attributes of their death, and so Stephen has the stone. And then if we go a little bit closer here, you can see here the back of his head. I know, it can be gruesome, but it's connecting Stephen to his martyrdom and his bravery and his steadfast faith. We also see this amazing architecture behind them. Look at how Fouquet has given us this very subtle depth with the architecture, that line work, those columns. Look at here. The elaborate geometric pattern on the floor. The circles and squares of this marbled interior are extremely Roman. Total classic pull. So it's Renaissance in that respect. Additionally, we see these high details of the fabric, the textures. Look at the fur collar. Look at this very thick red wool. Look at those fur cuffs there. So we see elements that are characteristic of the Northern Renaissance. And yes, technically, Tours, France, where Fouquet is not very Northern Renaissance, but it has those characteristics that we see also in the North. And so we can see this connection or this exchange of ideas and what art during the Renaissance period looked like between France and Flanders and the rest of Northern Europe. On the opposite side, we see this panel. And yes, it's, I believe your textbook calls it unusual. Mary is this almost alabaster skin. She's got this marble-like flesh, and she and baby Jesus are surrounded by these red and blue cherubs, these angels. The figure of Mary breastfeeding is not uncommon at this time. Yeah, we may not have seen it in this class, but the figure of Mary breastfeeding is a very common scene to show the humanity of Jesus, the fact that he was in the form of a man. Also, in terms of iconography, when we see women who are breastfeeding, it is a symbol of charity, of giving of oneself for the benefit of another. And then to connect that to the Virgin Mary, it makes complete sense that she is giving of herself, of her son, for the benefit of humanity. So this breast that is exposed is not supposed to be seen as sacrilegious or porn. No, this is supposed to be seen as an understanding of the beauty of this relationship between mother and son, and this charitable giving of a mother to save all of humanity. Now she sits on this extremely elaborate throne that's just encrusted with panels of marble and rubies and pearls, and look at these gold tassels. I mean, it's insane, and it's speaking to the wealth and majesty of Mary, of heaven, the kingdom of heaven. And she, in turn, has on a crown like the Queen of Heaven. In her lap sits her son. He uses her as his throne. And Mary is often referred to as the throne of Jesus, the throne of Christ. So here we see her acting as a throne, sitting in a throne as the Queen of Heaven. The costume that she wears is that of a French queen of the 1400s. So we're making this direct connection between Etienne's religious understanding of the world and his literal, physical world around him. Remember, Etienne is the royal treasurer for the King Charles VII, who just fought and won control over the French throne because Joan of Arc said, God wants me to be the king. And then here we see a Mary dressed as a French queen. Now, to add a layer of scandal to this, it's not that her boob's out. The scandal comes in the fact that, hold on. Okay, the scandal, or the layer of it, is that Etienne was the royal treasurer to this guy, Charles. Charles VII had a wife and a very prominent mistress. The mistress, her name was Agnes Sorel, and the mistress was used as the model for Mary. I know. So the Virgin Mary is painted to resemble the beloved mistress of Charles, not his wife. I know. Why would he do this? Okay, well, just prior to this painting, Agnes, the beloved mistress, she had become a very dominant figure in French court life. She had 3 daughters for Charles, and she was pregnant with her 4th when she died suddenly. And there was much speculation of poison and murder. Maybe she was getting too much attention, or she might give birth to a son. Who knows? But Etienne, as a testament to his faith or fidelity to Charles, may have chosen to have Agnes as the model for Mary as a sign of his loyalty, or to earn favor with Charles. Because remember, Etienne's not a noble. So he's risen up this rank, and he's got this need to maintain it. So who knows? It's just another layer of it all. Scandal of art history.